Recording in progress. That's what I wanted to hear. Great that I remembered it now and not in like 10 minutes. Okay, we're talking about REST API design today. So I want to talk about the difference between a website and a web API. A website is a series of endpoints, a series of paths you can make requests to, where the data that comes back are really meant for humans to read. So there are going to be endpoints that return things like things like HTML and JavaScript and images, stuff like that. Docs.google.com. What I'm looking at now, this is kind of like more of like a website. Something like I don't know, like example.com or anything that's sort of like a website that or a thing you might visit and use in the web browser, like facebook.com or like gmail.com. Those are all more meant for human consumption. The opposite, though, we're going to be spending pretty much today talking about are web APIs. So web APIs are meant for computers to use. So what web APIs that we're going to use in Careers in Code are going to primarily transact in is JSON, what we learned about yesterday. So a couple examples of what a web API might be are some of the Careers in Code.xyz endpoints we've used. In particular, the ones yesterday we were using with JSON, that would be like a really good example of like an API endpoint. I would still say like what we were doing earlier with the plain text still kind of counts. Conceptually, that's what's going on. But you're going to tend to see that API endpoints are going to give you data back in more of a structured format that a computer can understand. And also later today, our New York Times API we're going to talk about, that's also going to be an API. And we're going to try out the GitHub API as well today. And that's also going to be an API. Any questions on that before I keep moving forward? Okay. Let me also define API. I'm guessing Max has used this word a bunch. I'm not sure if he's defined it, but I just want to define it to make sure that everyone knows. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's a set of functions or procedures that you can use to access another system. And I'm being kind of generic there on purpose, because something like a web API, like careersincode.xyz/JSON, that's an API. I'm accessing data on another system. I'm making a query to the system. I'm saying, please give me back some JSON data, and it's giving me back that data. But similarly, like there are other types of APIs that don't even have like the web involved. It's a sort of a generic term on purpose. Like a great example there is in the web browser, something like document.getElement by ID, excuse me. That's a function where you call it, you query it, you say like, I want to get an element with this ID, and it talks to the browser, it sort of figures things out, like queries the DOM, and then gives you back a reference to that element. So that's another situation where, like, in essence there, what's going on there conceptually and what's going on with like that JSON endpoint are the same kind of thing. There's like a query being made and data coming back from the thing being queried. And that's the form that something like an API often takes. Okay. So we're gonna like APIs are great. I just want to like lay that groundwork, but for the rest of the class, we're gonna be talking about web APIs in particular. So APIs that transact over HTTP and JSON. And it's kind of like a happy accident these exist. So if you have a web browser and the only language the web browser can speak is HTTP, then if you want to have your web page communicate with like something else out there, you have one option, HTTP. So people had to figure out like how to make like a way, like a sort of a set of principles you can use on like, how do you communicate from a web browser to a server? I mean, you could just like make whatever request you want with whatever method, whatever path, like headers. You can do whatever you want. I mean, it's HTTP, it's giving you all this sort of control. But if you just sort of go like Wild West on it, no one can really, it becomes hard to understand what's going on. Having some like principles, some strategies around how you communicate, like what methods do you use for what things? How do you structure your paths? That's often like really helpful. So these this sort of idea of like this structure to the queries we're going to make, sort of the norms by which that communication happens. we're going to be talking about probably the most popular set, and that's called REST. So REST stands for Representational State Transfer. That's kind of a tongue twister. Representational state transfer. Yeah, there we go. And these norms are kind of what we're going to be using because they work really well for a lot of the kind of applications you're going to be building for your capstone. Importantly, though, like these REST principles we're going to talk about, like these sort of like approach is a best practices thing. And this, I want to call this out at the beginning because we're going to talk about some stuff, and these are not like, you don't have to do this. It's more just if you follow these principles, then if anyone comes across your code, they'll be able to easily understand what you're doing. But we're going to see like there are situations where REST just doesn't really work. And you sort of have to be like making things up or like guessing or like trying to sort of fit in what you want to do into REST to kind of get it to work. And we'll touch on that in a second here. Okay. So the first, actually, before I keep going here, any questions about web APIs, REST, how all those pieces kind of fit together? Okay. So the first part of REST, sort of the most important part, is what's called a resource. So a REST resource is like, this is going to be such a bad definition, but it's so generic. It's like a thing you can perform actions on. So let's say we had like an API for a car dealership. You might have like a customer resource, a salesperson resource, a car resource. And these resources are sort of like the entities in play in your system that sort of like might have like relationships with each other. So maybe something like a salesperson sort of has like dealt with many customers, or like a car has been owned by many customers. Maybe like a car was sold by a salesperson, something kind of like that. But like these sort of resources represent a lot of the key concepts in your system. And also I should bring up, resources are always nouns. So they're going to be like that. They're going to sort of serve that kind of function grammatically, if that analogy works well for you. Okay, so we have our nouns. We have like these resource things, but then we also have like actions we do along with these nouns, these resources. And this is good. There's a lot of acronyms today, and it's not actually that important you remember all of them. I just want to expose you to all of them. This one, though, CRUD, is probably going to come up pretty often. So CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. And these are kind of the primary actions that you do in REST. If you think about like, if you have like a list of items and you want to modify that list in some way, you can take that list and you can modify it using a series of creates, reads, updates, and deletes to get to any other list. So like, let's say you have a starting list that's got like one item on it, and your ending list is like 2 items. Well, then you can create a new item, and then it gives you the 2 items. Update, maybe you have like, you start with a list that's got like 1 item, and the other list has like an item that's been changed. Well, that's an update. And then delete is sort of opposite of create. I think you're probably catching my drift here. But like, if you had, let's say you started with a list where it was like 1 item, and then a list that was like maybe 2 items, and then like the first item was modified, then that could be like a create or an update. So like, this is the sort of thing where to do what you want, it might require a few of these operations, but because these operations are sort of small and each do like one individual thing, when combined together, you can sort of build up these sort of more complicated workflows. We're able to do like a bunch of things to sort of accomplish what you want to do. So that's kind of why these actions are sort of standardized, because they are sort of the smallest level atomic building blocks you need to manage a list of data. And you'll find out when we get to the database stuff with Max later on in the class, but I'm going to sort of hint at it here, that a lot of the data you're going to store is going to be in the database, which ends up being a lot of lists of data. So it corresponds very well to that paradigm. So that's CRUD. And how are CRUD operations implemented? So we've talked about CRUD, we've talked about resources, but how do we actually do these things in the REST paradigm? So there's a pattern here you tend to follow with REST that I think is one of those things where like the first time you do it, it's like, okay, this is a little weird, whatever. But then you do it over and over, and it just becomes like, oh yeah, just like it all fits this kind of pattern. So with REST, your resource is always when it's in your URL, it's always plural. So it's not car, it's cars. So if we have like a series of CRUD operations to modify like a list of cars, to create, we'd make a post request to /cars. To read, we'd make a post or a get request to /cars, get all of our cars. Or we can make a guest request to /cars/ and then like an identifier for one of our cars. So maybe let's say our identifier for a car is like its license plate number. So you could either get all your cars, so like get the whole table, or you get one row of the table. And REST sort of gives you both of those options. Then update, if you want to change one of your car rows, that is a put. So you would make a request with the put method to /cars/ its ID, or it's like its license plate. That's sort of you want to change that particular row in your list. And then for delete, same kind of thing, delete /cars/ID, which you delete one of those rows in the list. So in general, you have two sort of patterns you follow for the URL: /resource plural, or /resource plural /its ID. Natasha.
Question for you, sir. Okay, so put is kind of resonating with me as push from GitHub, like when you're updating and changing things. Can I put that in my mind? Is that okay? Are they similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think conceptually, like if you were to model what you do when you like push code with GitHub, like you are updating that code.
Right.
You could think of maybe like, imagine your resource was like a GitHub repository. So when you create a new GitHub repository, that's like post/repositories.
Right.
And then when you like go to GitHub and you look at the page, that's like get /repositories/ID. And then maybe like update is maybe like you change the repository's name, or you like push code to the repository, or sort of like change the data you're seeing. And delete is like if you wanted to get rid of the repository.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to segue everyone. I just wanted to kind of mesh the two in my mind and make it make sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Cool. Any questions about CRUD? I should also mention, Goggin, go for it.
My thing was that why use REST API over just APIs?
Yeah, so I guess like when you say over APIs, you mean just over like any web API, or do you like, I guess I just want to clarify.
REST API system than regular API, like what's the
So really it tends to be that if you follow patterns that other developers are familiar with, if you follow standards, then it means that anyone can come across your code later, and it's easier for them to understand what's occurring. So it's kind of a similar thing with JSON, where you can. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say the same thing. Like it's the same thing as JSON, like standards.
Yeah, it's like the kind of thing where you can encode your data in some crazy way with dashes and semicolons if you want, and it could work. But what you're probably going to end up finding is if you were to take the evolution of that to the extreme and like run into all the bugs and like fix them, you'd probably end up with something kind of close to JSON. So think about REST in a similar way, where like originally, like way back in the day when sort of the web was like in its infancy, what people would do is they would just have bespoke endpoints for things. So let's say you maybe needed to like get data for a page to like render it. What you would do is you'd make a request to just like get /my random request endpoint, my random path, whatever. And then you get back some data, and you maybe like data would just be like contain lots of stuff all over the place. Like it would have maybe like a list of users in it, but then also have like a bunch of data associated with the users, and then maybe like a count of like the notifications you have, like in the corner. It would just have like all together just like one endpoint. And that works, but what you'll find in that sort of paradigm is it doesn't really work very well. It doesn't generalize very well. So if you have another application, you now need to make like a new set of API endpoints. You're like, oh, okay, this only works for like that application. So what ends up happening is like, again, if you kind of follow that progression, you end up in this sort of thing of like, okay, let's make some generic endpoints. Then you realize like, okay, like what I'm doing, the operation I tend to perform tend to fall into these categories of create, read, update, and delete. Okay, cool. So like maybe we make some like standards for how you could structure those endpoints. And like there are definitely problems with REST, but it's one of those things where like for the most part, it fits most situations pretty well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Oh yeah. So I guess I wanted to mention too that like the method in CRUD matches 1-to-1 with the operation. So like creates are always posts, reads are always gets, updates are always puts, and deletes are always deletes. So that may or may not be helpful. But so I wanted to kind of go through like what each of these requests would look like. So we're going to assume for these examples here, we've got a cars resource, and it's located at /cars. So if I just tell you that, and I say there's a server, it's at careersencode.xyz, and there's a resource /cars, it follows REST conventions. Just by telling you that, and I say, can you create a car? You would know how to do it. Like you don't have to be like, oh, what method is it? Like, what's the path? How do I structure it? You just know, oh, okay. So it's a post to /cars. And in our case, our JPI is going to accept JSON, and most like REST in general tends to be like a JSON. JSON is used transactionally. It's what we're going to use for queries and code. So, and then okay, so I got to specify my data in JSON. So if I want to create a car, then maybe this would be a way to do it. So I make a post to /cars, and it has like, let's say a car has 2 fields, company and model name. So I specified my company and model name in JSON. Also notice I've passed my content type and accept header. So I'm sending JSON on the body of this request, and I'm expecting JSON to be returned in the body of the response. And then in my response that comes back, I'm omitting the headers just for brevity here, but like I get back something like a 201. So 201 stands for 201 created. And that's what you tend to get back from REST creates or CRUD creates. So it's kind of semantic, but like a 200 is just like, okay. A 201 is like, I made a thing and I'm giving it back to you, kind of. And this is like one of the cases where there's just a bunch of different sort of 200s that all sort of classify themselves differently. There are many APIs that don't give you back a 201. Like it's just sort of, it's one of those things where it's nice and sort of what you should do if you want to follow the exact REST sort of philosophy, but people are inconsistent. So then, Palash, go for it.
This request says like uses the post method with an accept header. I thought accept was used with get to tell the server what format of data I'm asking for.
Accept can be used with any method. So you can use it with the post, with the put. What that means is this accept header is specifying the format of the data that came back in the response. So if you make a post, like if you're still gonna have a response, like you would include that you would include that header to say like, oh, that's what my format is going to be of my response.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. And I want to say it again, but there would be some headers in here too that I'm omitting for brevity just to fit it all in one slide. So you probably get like a content type header back in your response as well. But you'll see that there's something else we got back in our create. We've got back this field ID. So every system is going to call it something a little different. ID is probably the most common, but usually, well, if you want to follow like a lot of these CRUD patterns, you saw that like you need to specify some sort of identifier so that you can unambiguously point to an item on your list later. And that's what this ID is about. So if you get an item that you, let's say, create, it's going to have this ID in it. And what this ID string is used for is anytime you want to make a request and you want to point back to that item, you point by that ID. So I'm going to show you what that looks like here in a second. Go over here to the get. Okay, we had to have. No, okay, we just have the one get. So if I make like a get to /cars, this is going to be like the whole table. So it's going to give me back, if I do this after I make my post request, it'll give me back a list of objects. So this is kind of going back to that pattern yesterday we were following, where we had like an array of objects. That's a way we could represent a collection of items. So you can kind of do that here. So you've got like every row sort of in your list with a corresponding, the corresponding data and the corresponding ID. So where that ID comes into play is when you want to do like a post or a put or a delete, so an update or a delete. So if you wanted to update that car, you wanted to maybe change its company name from Pontiac to Ford, do something like this, where you make a put to /cars /its ID. So you say, I want to update that particular item in the list. And then you give it the new data that you want it to be in there. So like company, model name, and once you pass that, that goes over to the server does its processing, and then it gives you back a response. And the response has your data updated. So it's got like the entire representation of your data with the ID, with the company, with the model name, all that stuff. And if after you did this, you then made like a GET request here, then it would look something like this instead. So you can sort of hopefully get the drift here where like there's some state being managed on the server, like there's some data that you're dealing with, and you can make a request on one endpoint and the server will sort of like take that into account, and that'll sort of be stored. And then if people like request that data again, they'll get back that persisted data. So Taylor says, would it maintain the same ID after the change? And yes, it will. So that ID is like assigned at creation time and should never change. I say should because there are exceptions, but like if it changes, it's going to make your life very hard. It should never change. And then for delete, our delete is very sort of similar to our update, where do delete /cars, your ID. And then from a delete, you get back usually a 204. So this is the kind of another one of these 200 status codes. A 204 is a fancy way of saying like everything was successful, but I'm not going to give you a body back. It's just like it was good, no comment. Natasha, you said like in HTML, IDs can only be used once. Yeah, similar. Yeah. This particular format you see here, this is maybe a bit of a digression, but I'll touch on it, is what's called a UUID. It's one way you'll often see these ID fields represented. Another way you'll see it is just like a number. So like if it's a number, it's usually something where like the first person who creates a row in the table or in the list, like they'll get assigned 1. The next person gets assigned 2, 3, 4. It's like at the deli counter, you like take the little ticket thing, that kind of idea. And what'll happen also like is if let's say you get to like number 5 and then someone deletes number 1 will never be reused. So you'll get like one sort of like lost for all time. So then like 5, 6, 7, 8, and then if like someone deletes like 4, then you're just going to go like 9, 10, 11, 12, so on and so forth. So that's another approach to it. The downside to that approach, which in practice like is not, it can be important sometimes, but for a lot of the work you're going to do, it's not going to be. But like if you have numbers as your ID, then you can, when you create something, you can actually figure out how big the list is. It's sort of like leaking some information. So if your ID is like 55, then you know, oh, there's now 55 items in the list, or there at least was at one point. Like maybe someone deleted 1 or 2 or something at the beginning. But like it sort of gives you a feel for how large the list is. Some people don't like that you can do that. And in certain situations, it actually can be a bit of a security vulnerability. So that's why these UUIDs tend to be another approach that's maybe these days more popular, because they're just like, it's a different way of doing it, but they're sort of like randomly distributed throughout the entire text space that they can be in. So you can't really, they're like random. You can't really figure out what where they fit in the table. Okay. So that's kind of a quick run through of how you would make some requests that follow some REST principles and implement CRUD. Any questions? And keep in mind, we've got a bunch of examples. I've just got a few more bits to get through, and then we're going to spend the whole rest of the class doing them. So And we're going to be talking to real APIs, not queries in code.xyz. Any questions? Okay. So I'm touching on what Gauguin brought up before. Why follow these rules? Predictability. So if you follow these principles, then it means anyone can come to your code, and if you can just say, oh, I've got this REST resource, it's located here, and people just know what to do. You don't have to explain like bit by bit exactly how it needs to be structured. It's nice because of that. It's you're following some standards. But, and this is where once you deal with REST for long enough, you'll start to realize that not everything fits into this like perfect CRUD pattern. And when they don't, what people normally do is just make something up. Like it's not a there's no real like standard with these unusual actions. So maybe like an example of one is, let's say we're going back to our cars idea. We want to like have an action where we like sell a car. So maybe there's like a request you make, and when you make that request, it does like a bunch of things. It may be like, we'll take that car, we'll change its owner, and then it will like transfer some money between two people, and maybe like create a new like title document. And all those things need to happen together in one request. Like you don't want to allow someone to like transfer ownership of the car, but then not get their money. So like it needs to happen all together as one operation. So you have to have like one request to do it. But it's like, maybe I guess it's like an update, like you're updating who the car belongs to. But even that doesn't fit so well because you're creating like the title, you're transferring money. So in a case like that, I would probably opt to model it in a different way. Like I would just be like, I would put like, maybe like post the car ID /sell. So if I made something like a request to that with like data in my body about like the new owner and like the amount the car sold for, then it will like do all that stuff at once and then give me back sort of like, be like, maybe give me back a 204 or like a 201 and be like, okay, we did everything. And then if you were to like query the list of cars, you'd see, oh, the owner changed. If you queried like a list of like everyone's bank account balances, you see those all updated. So it's like, they can all happen together as one operation. That's maybe one reason why you do this. But so Natasha said, is this where the JSON string comes into play? Often when you have these like custom actions, you might want to include like some JSON in the body to describe what you're doing. But I think on top of that, though, like this request here just doesn't fit any of those CRUD molds. Like it's not post/cars. It's not like get/cars or get/cars/ID, or it's not like put/cars/ID or delete/cars/ID. Like selling a car isn't like one of those operations. So it's like, I think you're right in like that, like JSON comes into play here where like that might be how you specify exactly what you want to do. But I think like the point I'm really trying to emphasize is that this is like an unclassifiable operation. Does that make sense? Cool. Okay. So the next thing about REST is you can have what are called nested resources. And the best way to think about this is, imagine that you have like in our cars example, you've got like cars. And each car has an ID, but then each car maybe also has something else. Maybe each car has had a bunch of owners over time. Or like each car has like contains like a bunch of people, and you want to have like get all the passengers inside of a car. So like one way you could model that with this sort of nested resource pattern is by having like get/cars/car ID, and then have a resource after that. So then that resource after that tends to kind of apply to the resource before it. So something like, I guess in this owners example here, like /cars/car ID, and then /owners. That's like giving you a list of all the owners that car had over time. And then if you want to get detail for like one particular owner, you could do /car/car ID /owner/owner ID. So the idea is like you can kind of stack up these sort of rests or like CRUD bits together in your path. And you can craft these queries that semantically apply to sort of like a subset of objects or to a filtered set of objects through something else. Any questions on that? Any thoughts on that?
Is there a reason there's a colon before car ID?
Yeah, good question. I should have brought this up. So usually when people write, or I guess I shouldn't say usually, but often when people write like endpoints like this, you'll start to see the syntax, especially as you get more into Node and Express later with Max after the break. I think after the break. This sort of pattern usually indicates that you put an ID here. And this ID is like has a name of something like owner ID. Like that's sort of like what you'd semantically think of it as. So you can think of this as like more like this in practice, or this is like maybe one ID. Come on, select it. There we go. That's like one ID. That's like the other ID. Cool. So I guess I should also say importantly, like if you have something like this, it's not like that. Like the colon is like part of the like identifier to replace usually. Cool. Okay, so those are like a lot of the core fundamentals of CRUD and how REST tends to structure those CRUD resources. So I'm going to go through a couple more examples, and these are going to be for some situations that you often come across in REST and different sort of patterns people have come up with to solve those situations. And hopefully this is going through this is maybe going to become more clear, like what you might put in headers, what you might put in the body, what you might put in a query string. Like this is sort of where that starts to come into play. If you follow these principles, then it gives you answers as to like where you typically would put that information. So the first case here we're going to talk about is filtering a list. So you have like a get/cars endpoint. So you're getting like it's a REST resource for car, getting like a list of cars. And a pretty common thing you might want to do is like filter that list. So maybe return a list for all cars that are red, like filter by color. So like there's a couple different ways you could do that. Probably the easiest way is just make a request to the server, get back all the data, and then on your client, just like loop over it and just like check out all the rows that don't have a color of red. That could totally work. Where that starts to break down though is when your database contains many, many rows. So for your capstone, you're probably not going to have to deal with this. But imagine you have a database table or like a list of data that is, I don't know, 100,000 rows long. That's like not uncommon. At work, where I used to work before I work now, we had databases that had like tens of millions of rows. So like you obviously can't like just download all that data. Like both from like a performance perspective, like reading that list every time is not going to be great, but also just like think about how much data you have to send over if you were doing that. So you typically want to have some sort of way you can filter data. Like you can tell the list endpoint, only give me back data that matches a certain set of criteria. And usually the way that you do this is with query string parameters. So that's kind of where they come into play. So what you might see, I think I have an example here. Yeah, here we go. Excellent. So I'm going to switch this over to be the cars example I just used. I like that one. So you might see something like this, where you'd have like get cars, color equals red. And in sort of a REST paradigm, this kind of filtering lingo means like give me back all the rows, all the items in my list where the color is red. And what ends up happening is you end up inevitably needing more complex filters, like things like, I mean, imagine like with this car analogy, you have things like you have like a like maybe like the year the car was created, and you want to do things like give me all cars that were created before 1980, and those become more complex. It's not just like year is 1980. You have to do a thing like year less than, or this is where it starts to become more ambiguous and less specific. So I'm not like going to go into that in particular, but what I do want to communicate is that generally query string parameters with REST APIs is where people put filters. And in these simple cases, like this is usually what the filters look like, where you've got like a query string parameter that usually lines up with the key name of an item in your JSON, and then like a value it's equal to. Another filter that you'll often see, that I touched on the previous slide in text, but didn't actually talk about, is limiting the length. So let's say you want to return like the first 10 cars in the list. So you might have something like a query string parameter that's like limit 20 or limit, I guess, 10, but whatever, you get the idea. Like say like, okay, only give me the first so many of them. You might also have something that's like skip so many, then give me that another amount after that. So maybe like skip 20, give me 10. And this idea is like with this, you can sort of have like pick a window of area in your list. You're like, I only want the first 10 or the last 10 or like the middle 10. So it's just like another kind of filter you might run into. But in general, like filters, really the takeaway here is filters go in query string parameters. Like that tends to be in a REST paradigm where they go. And I think we've been over query string parameters quite a bit, but just one last review here. They tend to be structured like this, where you have like your path, then a question mark, and then the name of your parameter, an equal, and then the value. And then every parameter is separated with an ampersand. So it's like the first one's a question mark, and then it's ampersands in between all of them from then on. Natasha.
Is there a limit on how many filters you can apply per GET request?
Nope. I mean, so nope, with the caveat of if you apply enough of them, you might cause the server to become really slow. But like, there's no practical limit like in what you type. Like from a client's perspective, you can ask the server to apply as many as you want.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that's query string parameters. Okay, cool. So I got a little example to do here, and you all are welcome to follow along with me if you want. So I have a REST resource on queries_encode.xyz/users. So I'm going to go over into Postman here. I'm going to get all my users. So code.xyz/users. Users follows all the REST principles. So I'm going to make a GET request to /users. And what I get is some JSON. So you can see here, if I make this a little bigger, inside I've got a bunch of users. So I've got like an array here with objects, and each of my, I've got a bunch of keys in here. They're all sort of identify different attributes about the user. I've just got a big list of users. And if you're curious, this is just like random fake data I got online somewhere. Like these don't correspond to real people. Cool. Okay, let's try to add a filter. So the way this API is set up, and there's no documentation for it, so I'm going to be your documentation right now, is if you want to filter by any of these parameters, you can specify it as a query string parameter and then set it equal to what you want to filter by. So let's say I want to filter by city. I think there's city in here. I swear there was city in here. Okay.
Yeah, go down a little further.
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah. So there's should be city in each of these. And these are just like random cities. I'm going to filter by Philly. So looks like there are 2 people in Philly. So there's this first person here. Looks like I'm trying to find their name here. Russell Weatherspoon is in Philly, and Clifford Lopkin. That's just some great names. So this is an example of maybe a filter you might apply, and you can try it for any of these. Maybe you want to be like, give me everybody whose age is 30. So it looks like there's quite a few more people who have an age of 30. Or let's try like country. I guess probably everyone's in the US. That's maybe not a great example. Whatever. I think you get the idea. So you can specify like whatever kind of filters you want up here. And I think this should work for all the fields. I will be honest, I haven't tested it in like a few months, so it should work, but city will definitely work though. I know that one works. So I would say if you get a chance, give it a shot. If you want me to give you a few seconds, just let me know and I can pause here. But this is maybe a great example to use to try out making a request with REST. And then also try putting a filter on there and see what that does.
My bad. I stepped away for a second. What were we doing?
Yeah, so right now I'm making a request to the user's resource on cruising code.xyz. So this resource contains a bunch of user data. So what I did here is I made a request to just the cruising code.xyz/users, so like the root of the resource, get/users. And in here, I've got a bunch of users. And then I added a filter. And once I added that filter, the user list went down quite a bit. I've only got 2 users now. So that's really what I wanted to show. I'm just encouraging you to give it a shot, but yeah. Okay. How's it going? Anyone having difficulty? Want to chat through it? Or okay. I'm probably gonna keep. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm gonna say I'm using Postman. I think it's working, but again, I'm not really too sure. Can I share my screen?
Yeah, go for it.
Can you see the Postman?
I do.
Yeah, so I think so. Let's say age. Let's say 38, whatever. I think that's the right syntax, right?
Yep, that looks right.
Click send. So
Yeah, I don't know if that age filter is working right.
There's the age, and I put down it's like 33 and 52. I'm like,
Yeah,
it's like
that
it's
looks-
working, but it's not really working. I don't know how to explain it.
yeah, I agree. Something looks off there. Try the city instead. I know that one will definitely work. I would guess anything that is I might have only implemented city. If so, that was real lazy of me. But anything that's a number is potentially not filtering correctly. But like, yeah, I guess I'd be curious if like someone was able to filter. Actually, let me give it a shot. If I filter by like surname, does that work?
Yeah,
No, it doesn't. Yeah, city's the only thing that works. Wow, that's lame.
it works for Philadelphia. So obviously I got the 2 right here. So
Yeah. Okay. Well, that sucks. But we're able to do the one filter at least. That's something. In general, in general with REST, you tend to implement filters for a lot of those sort of items because, I mean, as you're kind of probably seeing, like, you might end up deciding later, oh, wait, I need to filter on something else. And it kind of sucks to like have to have me now go like implement that filter. Like, it would just be better if they all existed. And usually, unless you're doing something weird, you can usually implement all those filters in a pretty straightforward fashion. So it's often not a big problem to do that. Okay. So the next thing we're going to talk about, the next pattern that often comes up in REST is when you need to receive a really long list. So my kind of metaphor for this is, imagine that you wanted to get a list of all transactions that were made across all Wegmans stores all over the country yesterday. It's a lot of data, like probably like millions of rows, something like that. And you can't send that all back to the user. Like if you just did like a get/transactions or something, that would be like gigabytes and gigabytes of text. It's not going to work. So you really need some sort of approach where you can like only return a subsection of the list. And the technique that people often use for this in REST is what's called paging. So imagine you have like a big long set of text and you like print it out of like a copy machine or like a printer. What it's going to do, it's going to take that text and it's going to split it up into a bunch of pages. And each page is going to get printed out in order. So you're going to have like page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. And each page is the same size. It's going to have about the same amount of data on it. So what you can do is you can specify to the server, okay, I want to make a request to the server, and I want to I want to request the first page of data. Something like the first, let's say, 10 transactions. And then you get that data and you say, okay, I want some more. Give me the next 10, and the next 10, and the next 10. And you can keep doing that by going like page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4. You can sort of work your way through all the pages in the list. So that is that's how paging tends to get used, something kind of like that. Pages, so like the way you specify the page you want to make a request to is usually a query string parameter, something usually called page. And you often can usually pick the size of a page as well, the number of items you have on one page. That's usually specified with something like a page size query parameter. Again, all just sort of like by convention, but things tend to be different depending on what systems you're looking at. So if you wanted to get like all the data in the whole list, what you do is something like make a request to get page 1. So like get/transactions page equals 1. Get that first page. And then after you get that page, usually you're going to find in that data something like some sort of value like, is this the last page? That might be like a Boolean, like, am I done? Or it might be a string that's like the URL that points like the next page or something like that. You're gonna have some way you can figure that out. Or you also, if you know your page size, can also just look at the page and be like, is the number of items I got back match my page size? Like that also works as an approach. But either way, like if you need to fetch your next page, then you make a request to go to get/transactions page equals 2. And you do sort of the same thing. You kind of keep looping around and doing that sort of same thing over and over until you get your last page. And then once you've done that, now you've got all your data sort of like transferred over in pages bit by bit. So for bandwidth, like transferring that data over the server or from the server to the client, like it needs to be small like this in pages for it to be efficient. But also thinking about it from the server's perspective, which you're going to get to sort of after the break, but I want to bring this up now at least. Like when you make that sort of a big request to a server, it's got to like sit there for a while and take your request and process it and like churn on it for a while. And there's potentially, depending on how your server is written, you can only handle a certain number of requests at the same time. So there are situations where you don't want requests that are sort of taking like seconds and seconds to complete because you can actually like overwhelm your server. So paging is a good technique you can use to minimize the amount of churning your server has to do on your request, because the amount of data you're requesting back is smaller. So, and often usually the data you get back corresponds with how much churning you need to do. So, okay. So you might have noticed with the example that we had in Postman, but there were some fields above our data. And this is kind of because this endpoint's actually paginated. Also probably noticed it said total 50, and there weren't 50 rows, 50 users in that list. You might have been curious why that is. So I'm going to make a get to just /users. And you'll see that if I collapse all these, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Got 10 entries in that data array. So my page size is 10. Now I also want to call out that the very first user in here has a surname of McQueen. Okay, so if I go page equals 2, hit enter. Now notice that page is 2. And now my first user has a username or a surname of Sturgis. And it's also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got 10 users in here. So this is like the next set of 10 users. And I think we're going to see if I'm if I did this right. Does it accept a page size? Let's see. Page size is like 5. Nah, it doesn't. Just page. Okay. So I would suggest you try to make a request to this endpoint. Try to see how many pages you can get through. Like, so page 2, page 3, page 4. I would also say try to enter a page size that's really large, like 99999. So if you enter a page size that's really large, that page is empty, like it doesn't exist. So you don't get any data back. Similarly, if you enter a page that's really small, there's nothing before the first page. It's just going to give you back no data. So give it a shot. Try a few page values. Give you a few seconds to do that. Yep, 5 pages.
Pages. Oh,
Yep. So we have 50 items, 10 per page, 5 pages.
I noticed that when we get to page 5 under the next page available, it changed from true to false. Is that how you kind of know when you're at the end of
Yeah.
the
Yeah, so that's how this particular API works. This goes from true to false. You can sort of use that to figure it out. But something else that I've seen before is like maybe having like a next and previous key, where like next is like maybe equal to like, let's say we're on page 1. Next might be equal to a strings like this, where it's like page 2. So the idea is like you can look at that, and if that's like set, you can go to that URL to get the next page. And let's say you were on like page 2, then maybe like you could have a previous, like PREV or previous or something spelled out that would be like page 1. So you'd sort of have like a link in both directions. And then if you get like all the way to the end, so in this case, like page 4, next could be null. And then on page 1, previous could be null. So that's like another approach where you can kind of like be like, there's a next page available, there's a previous page available, and not just that it's available, but also like, here's where it's located. Yeah, but like, again, like with all this stuff, I'm sort of giving you the broad strokes to sort of know how these things tend to get done, but you're going to see lots of variation across different systems. Everyone has their own little flavor on it. And just like, it kind of is what it is. Palash, go for it.
And these filters also take like a range, for example, page 1 through 4, or country, US or Mexico.
So it really depends on how someone implements the API, but I'll say in general, pagination tends to be just one page. If you want a series of pages, you make multiple requests in general. And if you want to do something like an or, so like and kind of is like just combine them together. So if you have like a bunch of query string parameters, they kind of by default like just and together, and that's what you get. But an or is a bit more tricky. And you end up in that case starting to need things like parentheses to like better express some of your logic, where you want things like country of US or Mexico, or and like I don't know, like city of Philly or something like that. And you have like that sort of combination, but then you're like, actually, no, I want to change where my parentheses are and change that around. So in general, like, yeah, I guess in general, you tend to find that ORing is something that exists in APIs a bit less. And if you want that, you end up making multiple requests. So like what you can kind of then end up doing is like if you have a bunch of things that are ANDed together, you can be like make a request for that, and then like your OR becomes like the next request. Like you make a request for like that group, and so on and so forth. And the way like you can end up structuring any kind of logic like that, although sometimes it's a little bit inconvenient.
Yeah, understood. So
Yep.
the best practice is to like get all the data and then filter it on your any interface like VS Code or whatever.
So in general, you want to let the server do the filtering if at all possible. But what you would do is you would do as much filtering as you can on the server to like get rid of most of the stuff. And then if there's like some amount of filtering you've got to do on the client side, just because it becomes difficult to do on the server, you might find you got to do a little bit of both. And like in that case where you have some, like a set of queries you want to like OR together, you might do something where you make 2 requests, get back the results, and get like 2 arrays of data, and then like union them together, like combine them together, and that becomes your set of data. So but also like, I know I just said all that, but then on the other side, it's also like everyone does their own thing. Someone might be like, I need a special query parameter where I'm like, I could be like city, or I guess you had country. Could you like country and then maybe like US, comma Mexico, like Mexico, if I can spell Mexico. Yeah, like maybe you design your API in such a way where the comma means like one or the other. So it's the kind of thing where like it really just depends on the API author. They can
Okay.
kind of do whatever they want. And what's cool is once you get to write your own APIs, you can kind of make those decisions for yourself.
Okay, so does this OR and follow the same rule as JavaScript, like 2 ampersands or 2 those bars for OR? Or is it like completely depending on who sets the API up?
Completely depending on who sets the API up.
Okay.
Like I'll say the pattern that I tend to see the most is like if you have a series of query parameters like this, it just means like key equals that value. Sometimes people will like specify a query parameter multiple times. So like this might be a way you could say like country is US or Mexico. Like again, this is like one approach. So they might implement this, they might not. Another thing I've seen, and in particular, I really like this one. This one is the comma. Just it's a bit more concise. But like it's the kind of thing where like also in this situation you got to be aware that like your values, your items can't have commas in them, or else like you run into the problem we ran into yesterday. So it's like there's lots of different ways to do it. Everyone's got their own way. I know it's not a very satisfying answer, but like it's kind of is what it is.
I get it. Thank you.
Yep. So Natasha says, so Postman is the only platform we can use to request APIs. No. So you can make a request to an API with any tool we've used so far to make HTTP requests. I can make a request with Fetch, with Postman, with curl, any of those tools. You could make one with Netcat if you wanted to, though that might be a little bit challenging because those servers are going to be a bit more strict than mine when it comes to headers. But like you can make a request with whatever technology or whatever tool you want.
What's your favorite and why?
Oh gosh, that's a tricky question. I think I don't know if I can give you one answer. And the reason why is because it's almost like every tool has what it's good at.
Right.
And if I had to pick one tool, then that one tool is not going to be good at all the things. So if I'm like playing around with a request, I'm going to use something like Postman or curl. Probably for me, curl because I'm weird, but like Postman's what most people will use. If I'm building a web application, I'm going to use something like Fetch because that's the only way I can make a request in a web browser. That's the only way, I guess the only way we've learned, but that's like the way you'd make a request in a web browser. So it really depends on your use case.
So Fetch seems to be the more universal, but Postman is more user friendly.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking about it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Cool. Okay. So the summary, the classic summary slide. All these are, I'm going to say it again, they're all sort of defaults. They're like a great place to start. But in practice, REST is like built for this like perfect world that doesn't exist, where everything can be modeled as a CRUD action. So it's a great place to start, but follow REST principles when you can. And if you can't, then it's fine, but just be like intentional about it. That's really what I would like my takeaway to be from this sort of lesson here. Okay. So we are going to do some exercises now. I think we're going to probably do a few of the ones on the Careers and Code server to start with, and then maybe we'll take our break. And then after the break, we'll do some ones with some real servers. Okay. So on the Careers and Code server, I have a bunch of endpoints that I've made that follow the REST philosophy. In particular, the two we're going to be using are students and assignments. So there's a resource called students at the root of the server. So careersandcode.xyz/students. And then within students, there's a nested resource called assignments. So students and assignments have a relationship. Every assignment has an associated student. So if you wanted to get a list of all assignments that a student has turned in or has submitted or something like that, you might do like get/students/student ID/assignments. So it's nested like that. It's one of those examples. Anyway, though, a student has 3 fields. And by the way, this is all just summary information. We're gonna be doing some stuff here. So we're gonna refer back to the slide a bunch. I'm just going through it. We're gonna have this up as we're doing the exercise. But students have 3 fields: name, current cohort, and favorite color. All 3, actually, I guess current cohort's a number. So name's a string, current cohort's a number, favorite color is a string. So those are sort of your 3 fields in your JSON object. Here's kind of an example of what a student might look like. So they've got a name, current cohort, favorite color. Importantly, current cohort is spelled current uppercase C cohort with no space in between. Just like you move the JavaScript variable, it's camel case. Favorite color is the same way. Okay, so that's students. And then assignments. Assignments each have 2 fields: name and completed. So an assignment have a certain name and then has a Boolean completed indicating if it's been done or not. So this is kind of what an assignment would look like down here. And keep in mind, again, that every assignment is associated with a student. So you can't have an assignment without a student. You can't have an assignment that has multiple students. Every assignment has a single student associated with it. Cool. Okay. So once we get going, I'm gonna jump back to the other slide just so we have it for reference. But I would like everybody to create themselves as a student on the careersandcode.xyz server. And after you create yourself, you're gonna get an ID back. Keep track of that. Don't lose that. Kind of like the token from yesterday. Keep track of that. We're gonna need it for the next exercise. So you can do this in Postman. But I'm being very vague. I'm giving you little the kind of information you get in real life, create a student via this REST resource and go for it. So I'm going to put this back up just for reference. Okay, folks. So I'm guessing you might be having a bit of trouble with this one. And I'm going to give you a hint. Make sure you specify a content type header. Okay, folks. So I'm seeing some people in the chat mentioning that they're getting some unusual results. Let's go through this one together. I want to make sure everyone's set off on a good path here. I think there might be some details that are being missed. I will say I did just test it out. It looks like it's working fine. So this isn't a technical fault. I think things. I think there might be a detail that that I missed. Let me share my screen. Let's go through this here. So I'm going to create a new request in Postman. So I said to make a request via the student's resource that allows manipulation, or make a request to the student for myself. So to create a student, I need to make a request to post/students, sort of matching the CRUD we went through earlier today. Go post. Okay. Now I'm going to specify my body. So going back to the earlier slide, we talked about this a bit. So I'm going to set my body here. I'm going to specify all the fields in my body that I want to include. So name, current cohort, current color. I'll go green. Okay, something like that. One last thing I need to do. So if you look over here, I need to make sure that I include that content type header. So we talked about this a few days ago, but now is really going to start to be the point where you really got to start to include that, because if you don't, certain things are not going to really notice that you're including JSON in your body. They're just not really, they're going to just think of it as like plain text and be like, I don't know how to handle that request. And that might either go well, like it'll give you back a 400 of some sort, or it might go badly. And it looks like my server maybe is not handling plain text all that well. So generally, though, you want to make sure you include that header. So, content type application JSON. So I think I brought this up, but if I did an application JSON is the content type for JSON. You're going to see that all over the place. Okay. So I've got this filled out here. I'm going to click send. Cool. So I got back a 201. So that means it resulted in a new resource being created, which is exactly what we want. And in here, got my name, current cohort, current color. I've also got this ID. So I want to keep that ID. I'm going to keep that around for now. Any thoughts on that?
Ryan, when I did it the first time, I didn't include anything in the body. So when it assigned me an ID number, it came back with a 201 like created. That means it assigned me an ID number just with like no identification. Like it would just be like unknown or null or blank.
Yeah, so I think my server might be a little bit sloppy and didn't handle that case very well. What I think it probably did is it tried to parse that body as JSON and didn't get anything. So it just sort of assumed that there was no data there. So when it created the object, it just sort of like didn't store any data in there, but it gave you back an ID because it needed to give you an ID for every row. So that's my guess, where like it's sort of like you didn't give it any data, so it didn't store any data in that item.
So like now when I want to put the data in there, I'm sorry, would I go back and use like the update method or just create a new one?
You can just create a new one. Yeah, we're probably gonna have a lot of like tombstoned old rows in our list, which is totally fine. Shay, go for it.
So what I did was I just copied the example you used in the slide and pasted in the body, and I still got the ID and stuff. I didn't specify any headers. Like I didn't do the content type application JSON, but I still got the same results. Like, so does it work that way as well? Like there are multiple ways of doing it, or was that okay?
The header might not be required. I forgot if I made it required or not. I should have verified this morning whether it was or not. But I think in general, the most important thing is you need to make sure you include your data in the body. So if you copy and paste it off the slide, that's fine. And make a post to the correct path. So what I'm going to do actually, if I've got over here, I'm going to make a get the / students. And I'm going to get a list of all the students in here. We're going to take a look and got a number of students in here. We've also got a lot of bogus rows. Yeah, so we got Shay, we got me, got Shay again, got two. I got Corwin, got Kenny, got Tara. So if you're able to make that post request, try to make the get request too. Just take a peek at your fellow students' data. Natasha, go for it.
I cannot add any text to the headers key and value. The key I was able to put in, but the value is not letting me like erase anything to change it or anything.
So you have this, does your thing look kind of like this with these values, or where you've got like a lot of the pre-filled items here?
Should I hide the auto?
Yeah, hide the auto-generated ones. Just down here in like below the auto-generated ones, that's where you want to put your content type.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. Cool. What do you all think that I can actually like spy on you as you do your work? Does that make you feel unsettled?
Can you open your header thing so I can see the value again?
Oh, yeah. Or was it over here?
Authorization. Oh,
Content type application JSON. Yeah. So application JSON, that's probably one of the content types you should think about memorizing. You're going to be using that quite a bit. So anytime you're sending JSON in a body, you should include content type application JSON. And also, technically, I should probably include accept application JSON too, because I'm receiving JSON back from the server. But that's less important, I think.
does casing matter?
For the key or the value?
Well, I noticed that your key has capital letters. So
Yeah. So in general with headers, no, it doesn't. However, by convention, you typically name your headers in that train case format with the uppercase letters at the beginning of each word.
Right.
And then content types are always all lowercase.
Thank you.
Yep. Tara.
I was trying to use the filtering that we just went over. So if I
Mhm.
wanted to do that, just to see if my blank ID is showing in the list, it would look like students question mark ID equals the ID number.
I'm not sure if I implemented filtering for this resource, but
Oh,
let's,
okay. Sorry.
does it not work? If it doesn't
No,
work-
it wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
I thought my formatting might have been wrong. I just wanted to check with you.
yeah, you got the right idea though. That's kind of what you would do. You all are really poking and prodding my stuff, which is great, but I wasn't quite expecting it. Cool. Getting a lot of people in here. This is good. Got some people who made themselves twice, which is fine, but yeah, okay. Okay. Next thing I want you to do. So you have your student ID. I want you to create an assignment within your student. So we did the, well, I'll let you give this a shot and then we'll go through and review it.
Wait, so I created myself in the assignments. Like I was, instead of like created student, I was like, why is there my name not there? So I checked it there, and then I think it's in assignments now.
Thing is in assignments now. Do you mean when you created an assignment, you included your user information in the body?
Okay, can I show you real quick?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I don't know, kind of confused today. So this is like what I did. Should move. But I think I went to assignments here.
Oh, when you create, okay.
I
That's
checked
odd.
here. I was checking like why my name is not here.
Yeah. Go
'Cause-
over to your post request. I swear I put more validation in this thing. This is kind of unfortunate. Get rid of the slash assignments at the end of that. I actually get rid of the colon student ID slash assignments, that whole part. Yeah. Click send, and then you'll have your student. So
Okay.
now you can make your assignment with that student ID, and it'll show up in that list. If you make a request, kick off the get request again.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. Yep. Okay. So Natasha, so you got a 400 bad request. Let's take a look. In general, 400 bad requests starts with a 4 means you probably formatted something incorrectly in your data. Ah, yeah. So take a look at your JSON. There's one thing that you're missing in that. No, in the text of your JSON, the sort of like format, there's you're missing syntax-wise one thing about it. So you have a JSON object. You've got a bunch of keys and values. What do you normally put JSON objects inside of? Yep, there we go. I bet if you send that, it'll work for you. Oh, you still got a 400. Oh yeah, and you got to stick some commas in there too. Cool. I think make current cohort, make sure that's camel case, so current uppercase C cohort. Yeah, what's still wrong with that? Oh, you're making a post to students. So keep in mind, you want to create an assignment, not a student. Oh, I can't hear you, by the way.
That I asked you in the chat if you saw me yet on the I guess the roster, and that was me trying to make sure that I got myself in there. Because
Oh, that's right. That okay, I see. Okay, yeah, I misunderstood. Let's see. Trying to look through here and see if there's anything else that pops out at me. Okay, I'm going to do something that I told you that comes up all the time. Can you give me a curl of this and can you send it to me in Slack? So on the right, look at the little code icon in Postman, a little like greater than, less than, like it's on like the right sidebar.
oh, this thing
Yeah.
right here.
Yep, that thing right there. And
Mhm.
then take that curl and copy it and send it to me in Slack.
Okay.
What's nice about this is I can replicate your request and I can take a look and figure out what's going on.
Super cool. So I got you here.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm. Hmm.
Okay, the plot thickens. I just ran your curl in the terminal and it worked. So that's great. To me, important to Postman, see if I can replicate your issue. Let me share my screen just so you all can see what I'm doing here. Okay. So what I just did is I took your curl, I just pasted it in here and hit enter, and I got this.
Yeah.
Looks right.
Right.
Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to go File, Import, paste that in there. Let's try it again, see what happens. What the heck? Worked for me.
This happened to me yesterday too. I was complaining about something, wanted some help, and as soon as I did it while you were watching, it worked.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah. So this sort of situation in software happens a lot too. And it's really frustrating where like you're trying to fix an issue and it's happening to someone else and you like can't reproduce it. And it's one of those things where like until you can reproduce it, you can't fix the problem.
Right.
So like I guess I want to help you, but I also don't know how to help you.
I hate that for me, but I'm gonna keep trying while you guys
Yeah.
move on and do all the lovely things I can't.
Yeah. One thing I did notice is it looked like in your request you had an authorization header.
Yeah.
Shouldn't matter, but maybe it did for some reason.
The token.
Yeah. So in this case, this endpoint doesn't need a token in order to access it. It's anyone can make a user or anyone can make a student, excuse me.
Okay. I think that was left over from the last time I was using Postman.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a big deal. Like it's an extra header. It's like should still work, but maybe that's a problem.
I'll play around with it. I don't want to take up
Okay.
any more time.
No problem.
Thank you, sir.
Yep. Goggin, go for it.
So the assignments we're gonna create is gonna be the same thing in the body, raw, like thing.
So in your body, you need to create an assignment. So an assignment has two keys, name and completed.
Oh, name or completed. Well, I was just trying around and I just did find X.
Yeah, I'm realizing that my API code doesn't have quite as much validation as I thought it did. So if you put in fields that are not what I said here, I think it still works, which is honestly not great. Like it should only accept these fields. So like you could probably try to post the data for a student to assignment and it might work, which is not great.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing, kind of. I don't know. All right, let's see. Body is not defined, formatted correctly.
You want to share your screen?
Oh no, there is. It's working.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be honest, I normally go through and test all these exercises this morning. I wasn't able to go through and fully test this morning, which is why I'm a little nervous, but like it should work. It's worked in the past. Cool. Well, let's go through this. Let me make an assignment, add that to my student. So I've got my student ID here from when I created my student. So if I'm going to create an assignment is a nested resource within a student. So if I go students/assignment ID, or sorry, students/student ID/assignments, that's sort of how I would access the resource for assignments. So importantly, like student ID, that's kind of like the student's resource. And assignments within that bit is like the assignments part. And what you can think of this sort of as like is that I'm like posting assignments. It's just I'm posting the assignments within the student's kind of prefix. Okay, so method still post. My body though has got to change. So my body is going to be name and completed. So I'm going to go name, go rest, exercises, sure. And then completed, I'll go false. Something like that. Okay, cool. Now, if I click send, I'm just going to make sure I have this copied. There we go. So after I did that, I had a 201. So my new assignment was created. And notice I've got name, completed, the ID. I also actually have here the student ID, which is kind of nice. So it's sort of exposing that student link. So I know, oh, this assignment's associated with that student. And if I were to now do something like a get request, like get all of my assignments, you'd see I've got one assignment here. So this is the request you should be making here locally. Of course, with your own student ID instead of mine, but importantly, like this is what the URL should look like. That's what the method should be. It's kind of what your body should look like. Any questions? Cool.
Is there a way you can see our assignments, or what is it? Or you need our ID?
I can. Well, what I can do here is I can like get students, and then I can go in here and be like, oh, okay, maybe I want to go find like there we go. Find your assignments. Go assignments. Like it's empty.
I
Maybe-
that's what on my end is showing that it's created. Like it's 200 or 201 on there.
It's possible you maybe have multiple user entries.
What is the ID? Let me see.
I think mine was starts with
Oh, yeah,
8344.
that's separate. Should I send you mine?
Sure, send it to me.
All right. Oh, okay. Close them.
Cool. There we go. Yeah. So clever. Ha 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 ha.
That's the thing that I hated most in school.
I mean, the jerks when you say that are just like, oh, there it is. There's X.
That's Falash. He said it the other day.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. So we've got one more exercise we're hoping to do before break here. So we've created our assignment. Oh, exercise. Yeah, actually, there are two. Okay. Do you all want to do two more of these, or do you want to take your break and then do two more of these? Thoughts?
Take the break and then do two more.
Okay, sounds good. We'll do that then. So maybe let's get back at like 7:40-ish. I think that's 25. Yeah. 7:40. Cool. Okay, see you then. Recording again. Oh, sorry.
Come on. Okay, yeah, that many lines of code.
Oh. Whoa.
Don't do that, because every time there's a O, there's a problem that you can't fix and I created. Come on.
Scroll up to the top of that list.
Okay. I'm sure there's an easier way to do that.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know it.
Copy the link.
Here.
Website.
What did I
Yeah.
do?
You got HTML back, which is interesting. So under the where it says like pretty, raw, and preview, click on preview. Scroll through there. Is there something anything? Oh yeah, I see. Okay. So what you did is you made a request to the documentation site.
Huh.
So you see how the URL there is docs.github.com?
Yes.
That site contains the documentation for how to make a request to the server. That's not the URL you need to make a request to.
Ryan, I literally used your code from the chat.
Yeah, so what I said is to click on that link in the chat and open it up in your web browser.
Yeah.
So if you open that up in your web browser and take a look, there should be a curl in there.
I see. Okay.
No problem at all. That's I should have clarified that further.
Thanks.
Yep.
Ryan, can you just do it one more time so that we can get it on video?
Yep. Good call. Good call. Okay. So what I did is I went to I started at the GitHub Docs site here. Then I went on the side here and I scrolled down. I found, yeah, okay. I went through, trying to remember how I got to the codes of conduct thing. Oh yeah, okay, I see. So I went over here, I went to REST API. There it is. And then I went to codes of conduct. I click on codes of conduct. Once I was here, I went over to codes of conduct here and I copied this curl. This is kind of the nice thing about curl. A lot of API documentation will illustrate the request you have to make as a curl. Then I took this and then came over into Postman and I went to File, Import, and I pasted it in there. And once I pasted it in there, I went over to headers and I just got rid of the authorization header. We don't have a token yet. So because of that, like I wanted to, we don't need a token for this request. And as just someone who knows GitHub's API, I was guessing that and I was correct. So I'm just going to get rid of that line. I'm going to click send. I get my 2 codes of conduct. Then if I want to maybe get individual information for one code of conduct, I can try the second request. So I could copy this curl, go through the same dance again. But I'm just noticing here it goes codes of conduct key. So I'm going to just stick the key there. Oh, and it would help if I spelled it correctly. And there we go. And we got our code of conduct. So we've got this body in here as well. It looks like it includes an extra field in the detail version of this endpoint, which will happen from time to time. I think that that kind of goes through it. So we should have it recorded now. Any other questions? Okay. Let's make a real request. Let's make a request, in fact, to something that only you can really do. Like something that isn't like just a public thing, something that requires authorization. In order to do that, though, we're going to need to generate a token. We talked about tokens earlier this week. And just as a quick review, think of a token kind of like a password. It's like a special use password you can include in your request that identifies the request as coming from your user account. And it's a way that the server can determine who is making a request. So the way that we make a token on GitHub is I put the link right here directly to it, which is probably going to be quicker than me trying to like navigate you through GitHub's interface. But effectively, I think you go to like the settings page and there's a token section in there and you can create one in there. So I'm going to click on this and open this up. Now, I do want to call out, we're going to be using the tokens classic, not the fine-grained tokens. They are different things. But fine-grained tokens, I think is going to be more confusing for this. I think we can just use the classic tokens. It'll be easier. This is pretty emblematic for how you would go about creating a token on something like GitHub. I'll also say if you're not logged into GitHub, it's probably going to ask you to log in first, so make sure you do that. So what you're going to see is like a little form here with a bunch of stuff, and at the very bottom, like a submit button. So I'm going to just put in here like careers in code test token or something like that. Now, expiration, this is where you can set how long the token will be alive for. So someone mentioned in the chat, I'm trying to remember who it was again, but had asked about like how long the tokens live. And this is what controls that. So for GitHub, it looks like they've got a few options: 7 days, 30, 60, 90, customs. You can set a custom like date or no expiration. I'm going to set 7 days just because in my case, that's a temporary token. I'm not going to need it afterwards. You might be wondering, though, why this is important. Like, why do you have to set this? Well, this, again, this token is a credential. It's like a secret password. And one thing that really sucks is if your token were to get leaked, like you were to accidentally post it on the internet somewhere, it's effectively like a password someone can use to access your account. So it's a bit of sensitive information. So because of that, this expiration lets you sort of give it sort of like a maximum lifespan so that if it were to get leaked and you didn't know it got leaked, at least you could control the damage. It's not going to be something that's alive forever. It's going to be alive only for 7 days. And after that, it's just going to get deactivated. So if you tried to make a request of this token after 7 days, it just wouldn't work. Okay. Now,
Change the expiration date while it's active.
That's a good question. After I create my token, we'll see. I'm not sure. So there's also on GitHub this idea of scopes. So GitHub will explain it. Will give you a little explanation if you want to. I will give you a summary here, though. So think of scopes as like permissions, like the things this token can do. And GitHub scopes are a little bit broad in what they control. For example, if I give my token repo scope, it means it can do anything in regards to private repositories. So I can create private repositories, read them, delete them, anything like that. I can do any deal with any associated like child resources of those repositories. So it's kind of a broad scope, but it's better, I guess, than just your token can do anything. But if you did want to let your token do anything, you could just check all these boxes. And that would make like a token that could do anything that your user account can do. So again, this is another sort of case where you're trying to like sort of make your token more limited in what it can do for security reasons. So I think we're going to talk about in Careers in Code. We're going to have a module on this later. But in general, with security, you tend to want to provide the least amount of access you have to get whatever you need done. And it's just because like providing more access opens yourself up to security issues where people can maybe do things they're not supposed to do, things like that. So in this case, for our token, we only need the repo scope. So that's the only scope I'm going to add. So I've entered a name, I've entered my expiration, I checked repo, and importantly, like the way this sort of works, it's kind of confusing, is you've got all these checkboxes underneath. So you can sort of select like subsets of that repo scope. Then if you check repo, it'll sort of select all of them. So we want all of them. That chop box. And after I do that, I'm going to click generate. But before I click generate, I just want to say something real quick, which is once I click this, it's going to show me my token. I am cognizant. I am being recorded right now. I'm being streamed to YouTube right now. So we're going to go through all this stuff, and I'm going to have like a token that's out in the clear that people can see on my video. That's not very good. Like that's not a very good security practice. In this case, I've sort of configured my GitHub ahead of time just so like that won't be too big of a deal. But know that I will be deleting my token immediately after the class. Like I'll block everything down and look at all my security logs, make sure there's no fishy stuff going on. So like I'm very cognizant of what I'm doing right now, and I'm fine with the security ramifications of it. But like this token, you probably shouldn't send that you're going to generate. You probably shouldn't send to someone in Slack. Like this is like our first token that's like a real like security thing we got to be mindful of. Okay, cool. So with that disclaimer out of the way, I'm going to click generate. Now, once I click generate, the way GitHub works is it's going to give you your token right here. It's going to start with a value like GHP. And you're going to want to copy that to your clipboard. That value, after you've refreshed your page, it says it right here, you're not going to be able to see this again. So this is the only time you're going to be able to see your token. This is for security reasons. It's a credential. The idea is like they're storing it on their end. And if you need a new token in the future, they're going to push you, instead of trying to reuse an old token, to try to instead like generate a new one. So like delete your old one, make a new one. Okay, cool. So this is my token. And whenever I make a request now, I will include this in the authorization header. So like authorization bearer token, just like we've talked about so far in class. To answer your question though, Natasha, let me go over here and see if I can. It looks like, yeah, so it looks like I have to regenerate the token, like delete it and recreate it if I want to change the expiration date. So looks like that's the, yep. Oh, was someone saying something? Sorry. Okay, I guess not.
No, I just said good to know.
Good to know. Okay. So yeah, I guess I'm just calling out in red text. Once you refresh your page, you're going to lose your token. So take that token, copy it to your clipboard, put it into a file somewhere. Just keep it around. You're going to need it. So, oh, I don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to configure SSO dropdown. That's because I've got some fancy GitHub settings. You're not going to see that. How long should you usually keep tokens going for? Good question. I think everyone's going to have a different strategy here. So for me, I tend to keep my tokens kind of for a long time, which is probably not a great thing. But I just secure them and make sure they're like locked away. Really, that like if you had someone like talking right now who had like very strong security posture, then they would probably say something along the lines of like you should rotate your tokens like weekly or bi-weekly or monthly or something like that. And like there's like a real benefit to that where like you want to sort of keep those things fresh. Like if it gets leaked, you're sort of like cutting off access to the old stuff. But yeah, I'm not quite that good. I just keep them locked down, keep them hidden away. Like if it gets leaked, like this, I'm sort of considering this here like a token leak right now. This is like a self-imposed token leak. So what I'll do after class in this sort of case, I'll delete the token. And then on GitHub and most other services, there's a log where you can see everything that a token's done. So I'll just look through there, make sure that there's nothing that like looks suspicious. And if there was, then I'll dig into it a bit. I'll be like, okay, something happened here, something was up. Like what happened? What was the fallout of this token being leaked? Make sure that nothing like truly bad happened. So,
Question.
yeah,
Can you show us how to do that in office hours, maybe?
sure.
We can like check the history of our own tokens if we feel like it might be compromised.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you.
I would say one other thing that may or may not be obvious, but I want to call it out is like, if you have a token, don't commit it in a GitHub repo or like don't commit it in source control. That's another thing where like, especially if it's a public repo, that's just public. That's out there on the internet. There are actually bots that will scrape through GitHub and look for tokens. Like we'll sort of look for characters that match a token pattern, and then they'll like steal tokens that way. So like that's like a well-known attack. Don't do that. Okay, we've got our token. So now we are going to do something fun. This is the first sort of exercise. I'm not giving you any details. I'm just like, here's a question, figure it out. We're going to do this first one together. The second one, though, I'm going to sort of like, well, I guess we'll see. The first one we're definitely going to do together. The second one we might do on our own. We'll see how the first one goes. Okay. How many public repositories does the HackUp organization on GitHub have? So I think you all probably know, but there is a HackUp organization on GitHub that many instructors are part of, but you all I think have seen. There's a bunch of things in here. And yeah, I know you folks can probably count it on the page. That's cheating. We're getting this via the API here. So, okay, how do we figure this out? Well, I'm going to start by going back to our trusty documentation here. And then bring the question back up here. So we got them side by side. Okay. So I think generally when I see things like this and I'm not really sure where to start, I start by identifying nouns, potential resources. So I see two, repository and organization. So like, I guess there's a couple different ways to think about this if you're making a query. You could do something like try to get a list of all repositories and then like filter them by organization. Or you could maybe try to look for like a sub-resource in an organization like repositories. Those are kind of the first two things that come to mind to me, but there might be other ways to do it too. Anybody have a favorite, which one they want to try to look for first? Any thoughts?
Search and filter.
Okay. Let's look for that one. So that'd be something like we look for organizations. Where's the documentation? There's the documentation. So we need something like, or not organizations, we need something like repositories and then like filter by organization. So let's see. For like, okay, repositories, that's good. Ooh, there's a lot of stuff in here. Repositories, sure, let's go with that. Okay. Well, I think this first endpoint might be what we're looking for here. List organization repositories. List repositories for the specified organization. Okay. Cool. Let's give this a shot. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to copy this. Go over to Postman. I'm going to make a, gosh, too many little zoom overlays. I'm going to close a bunch of these because I need to get rid of some of these. Okay. And now I'm going to go import the curl, same kind of thing we did before. Okay. Cool. So there's a couple bits of data. It looks like we've got a substitute in here. Looks like there's like this org thing. What if we can find like an example here? Yeah, okay. So it looks like there's this they're providing down here. Okay. So figuring that org thing out is going to kind of be a thing. We're going to have to do that. There's also, though, like our tokens. So we can put that in. So let me do that now. So I'm going to jump over here to tokens. I'm going to take my token here, bring that back over into Postman. I'm just going to like go to headers, put that in here. Okay. Something like that. Okay. Let me just try making this request first, though. Let's just see what happens. Okay, not found. Okay, well, here's a good thing. We didn't get like a 401 or a 403, and those usually mean like token issue. So 404 means like it couldn't, the path was not like a valid path on the server. And we've still got this org thing in here. So I'm kind of thinking that's what's going on. Like I'm making some assumptions here, but it's kind of how this tends to go. There's a little bit of like guessing and checking. It's not just like you get it right on the first try and it's good to go. Like you just have to like experiment and try some stuff. And even with GitHub's excellent documentation, there's a certain amount of that that's just going to be intrinsic in the process. Okay, let's go back over here. Let's see if we can glean any details. So organization, like there's some sort of ID or something for an organization. Here's a thought. What if we were to like find a way we could list organizations? Let's like maybe try a different request. Try to like list out organizations and see if we can find like some IDs for example organizations in there. So what like, let me go over here to like organizations. List organizations. Okay, cool, excellent. Let's try this request. So you see here, this is not like a very linear process. You tend to like try something and then be like, oh, okay, let me try something else. And there's a lot of meandering. Okay, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to put my token in there. I'm going to copy that, stick that back over here. Okay, put that there, click send. Okay, cool. So looks like we've got some organizations. Okay. So I'm noticing that each of these has like an ID, like a number like that. That's potentially interesting. Maybe try that. I wonder though, there's another thing here where there's like the detail. They've got the detail endpoint here, get an organization. Kind of want to try that maybe. So like this has got that org thing in there. Maybe we can like try that, see if we can like query an organization with that. So we've got this like GitHub example here. I'm not going to try just like one there. Let's see what happens if I try like one there. So I guess that's orgs, not organizations. Nice and consistent. Great job, GitHub. Okay. That doesn't seem to work. Okay. Let's try some other things. Like we've got our ID field. It's got to be in here somewhere, like some sort of identifier. I see node ID. I see login, URL. All the rest of these are like URLs, description, name. Okay. So login and name are both GitHub. That could be an interesting one. Let's try that. So let's try name. I like the sound of that because ID didn't work. Aha, okay. Now we're starting to get somewhere. Okay, so it looks like GitHub is like the thing we put in the URL that like gives us back GitHub here. Let's try maybe over for this request, let's try putting GitHub here. Like that was also the like curly brace org curly brace thing. That'll work. Okay, okay. We're getting somewhere here. So it gave us back a 200 now. It's giving us back some data. So that's good. That's exciting. Okay. But that still doesn't solve, like, this isn't for hack upstate yet. We got to figure out how to query this for hack upstate. Let's go back over here. Let's look around. Okay. So I'm looking at this. I'm seeing something kind of interesting here. And this is just like, I'm just noticing there's this HTML URL. And if I click on this, I'm gonna open this in a web browser though. Like, this seems to like go to like an organization page, which is kind of interesting. Okay. There's like so the way the GitHub API works, and this is a thing you'll often see in a lot of REST APIs, is if there are nested resources within a resource, they'll actually link them in the response for this resource. So you see like repos URL. It looks like there's a way you can see repos, which is what we're using over here. That's like that nested resource. They've got that linked there. Events, hooks, issues, like all the stuff's linked in there, which is kind of cool. The thing that's sticking out to me about this HTML URL is I gave like a URL for the hackupstate GitHub repo over here. And I've got the HTML URL for this. This is hackupstate. This is GitHub, which is making me think maybe hackupstate is that ID value. Like this is just, I'm like off on a ledge here. Like I'm just going down a path. I'm guessing. We could try it, like see what happens. So I'm just going to start by like, we had our request here to like get the organization. I'm going to be like, yeah, okay, we're starting to get somewhere here now. So this seems to be like giving us back data for our organization, which is exciting. Okay, cool. Yeah. It's like they're on some crazy plan too. Like they have private repos. Realize that. Okay. So let's try, we've got our value here. Maybe let's try like going over to here and putting that in here. Okay. Starting to get somewhere here. So a hackupstate ATTNJ. The ATT, yeah, so that's a repository. It looks like we're getting the right data in here. But this looks like it's a list of like all the repositories. This doesn't really solve our problem. Like we need to get just a list of the public repositories. So we're almost there, but like there's still something missing. We're not just getting like, haven't just gotten the public ones yet. I mean, I guess we could do something where you could like just go through and count like, oh, private false, okay. Private false, okay. I think that's, well, let's look at the documentation, see what it says. So over here, where was it? Oh, I navigated away from it. Let me go back. So it was repos, repositories, I think. Yeah, over here, over there. That's where we were before. Okay, so list organization repositories. A couple people posted some suggestions in the chat. /public or public is true. So we could try /public. Might be like a sub resource or something like that. Sure, let's give it a shot. Oh, this one. Too many windows. Okay, so maybe like public. No, it doesn't seem like that's going to work. Someone else suggested public is true. Let's try that. That might have worked. Let's see. So let's do it this way. Let's make that request. And let's count how many are here. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26. Hope there aren't too many of these. 27, 28. Okay, 28 looks like. Well, now let's go public true. One, two, three, four, five, six. One, two. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 7, 28. So looks like we got the same amount of data back. It doesn't look like that worked. Gotham says type. What do you mean? Elaborate.
Type public or something.
Seven, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. Oh, we only got 22 that time. That matched the number that who was it? Taylor posted, which is seemed potentially interesting. Okay. That might be what we want. Let's take a look here though. So taking a look at Kenny posted. Wait, did you post something I didn't see?
No, it was Kenny who posted the number 22.
Oh, it was. Oh, okay. Oops. So I guess it's kind of cool we just came to that through guessing, and you'd be surprised how often you come to that through guessing. Like it actually often goes that way. But let's figure out like how we could have come to it through not guessing. So looking at this here, list organization repositories, it says parameters for list organization repositories. So it looks like in here, there's headers. So you can set this header, accept header in a special way, or path parameters. That's like the thing in here, it looks like the organization name, and that's required. You've got to specify that. And then query parameters. Type, hey, there we go, can be one of all, public, private, forks, sources, or member. I don't know what most of those mean, but I know what public means. And we've got some other things too. So we can like sort, we can like paginate. So it looks like the default page size is 30. So what if I went like per page is like 2? Should only get 2 back. Yeah, get 2 back. Cool. And this is ATTNJ and very old website. Excellent repository name. And now maybe I go like page equals 2. Okay. Now I've got a Hack Upstate website archive 3/6/2018. How many Hack Upstate websites are there? And then another Hack Upstate website that's been archived. Amazing. Cool. So that's like pagination. And you might be like, but this is just an array of objects. How do I figure out if I'm on the last page? It's a good question. I bet in their documentation somewhere it says it. Yeah, go ahead.
So what does the page 2 does after the and? Like, so you already did the per page 2, and then you said and page 2.
Yeah, so per page is like looks like based off their documentation here is the number of results per page, so the number of items per page. And then page is like which page you're on. So,
Oh,
I mean, that's like what I'm understanding from the documentation here. So when I see this, I'm like, oh, okay, this endpoint is paginated. So this is like part of why I wanted to go through these concepts earlier today, because when you see things like this, you can start to be like, oh, okay, they're using this pattern. Okay, I know how this works. Cool. I think, if I remember right, the way GitHub's pagination works is they have headers they return back to tell you information about it. Am I right on that? Doesn't look like I'm right on that. Okay, never mind. There's but you could go the way where like you could just check to see if the length of items in here matches your per page value, and if it does, then fetch another page. If it doesn't, then you're done. That could work. So there's a method, but just kind of sucks. Okay, so that was kind of our first little exercise there. So I'll put it up again one more time so folks can take a look. I will also take this. I'm going to export this as a curl. And I'm going to, in here, I'm going to go over to here, paste this in, and I'm going to importantly get rid of my token before I paste that. So there's an example. If you want just like something you can copy and paste into Postman, this is maybe a way to go. Cool. Okay. So we're starting to run up against time here, and I realize we're going a little bit late. I have more of these GitHub exercises that I'd love to do with you. I think, though, because I do want to realize people are having to drop here due to time, I want to introduce the New York Times project, and I think I'm going to save the rest of these for office hours. So if you come to office hours, we'll do some more requests with the GitHub API. We'll make some repositories. We'll update some repositories, and we'll delete some repositories. How about that? Okay. And we'll also do some other things, too. Yes, so New York Times. Let's get you started on that, get you sort of what you need to continue there. There should be an assignment in Canvas with the New York Times sort of prompt, walking you through what you need to do. I should have it up, but I don't. Let me see if I can get it up here real quick. It'll be a little bit better prepared here.
so I have to head out too. I'm gonna have to go to work right now.
No problem. Feel free to watch the recording. There's just one thing you got to do to set up a token for the New York Times project they want to walk you through. But other than that, it's just what's in Canvas as the assignment.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
Good night, guys.
Yep. See ya. Okay. And wouldn't it be amazing if I can't even find the assignment because I just don't freaking know how to use Canvas? I was talking with Max about it a while ago. Let me find it in my chat history here. Okay. Canvas. Okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, folks. I will post this in the E5 channel. Okay. So here is the New York Times assignment. Max has his little prefix on here, whatever. Good job, Max. I've given you a link to some API documentation. So what you're going to need to do is click on this link, and read through this and read a bit about how their API works. They're going to give you some information. They're also not going to give you some information. So importantly, GitHub has some really excellent API documentation. The New York Times, it's okay. It's not excellent. It's okay. So there is going, like, I want to set expectations correctly that there's going to be a decent amount of like trial and error and banging your head against the keyboard. Like, that's part of this assignment. That's like part of what I'm trying to impart. It's not a pleasant experience, but it's the kind of thing where it's like you're going to learn a lot. You're going to get a feel for what it's like to actually work with the kind of APIs that you will encounter regularly. But before we do that, I want to help you all generate your token just ahead of time. It's going to be kind of nice if we can get that out of the way. So I'm going to post a link in chat. I'm also going to post it in Slack after class as well. And we're just going to all generate our tokens together just so that like everything will be good. Everyone's got that. It's a little bit janky the way you do it. So just want to walk everyone through it, have it on video. Okay. So once you go to the site, developer.nytimes.com, I want to go up to the right and click sign in. And then once you do that, you want to click create an account. And you want to fill out this form, click I agree, and click create. So just put in a password, put in your email, all that sort of stuff. And then once you do that, you should get like an email from them. You have to go through like a little verification thing. And eventually you'll be able to sign in. So I'm just going to click sign in because I've already got an account. But give it a shot. If I need to create another account just to go through that process, I can do it. But I think it should be pretty straightforward. If you give me a thumbs up, either in chat or just like a reaction once you've done that, it'd be appreciated, just to make sure people are following along here. Cool. Okay. So once you've created your account and you're in, you're going to want to go up to the right here and go to apps. This is pretty emblematic of how like these token creation workflows tend to go. And then under apps, you're going to want to click new app. Do we use the Twill app? What do you mean by Twill?
I can't remember the name of it, but it's just like an app that generates like tokens or like one-time codes.
Twilio, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't think you should need that for this. Yeah, I don't think they should need that for this. Okay. So just as a quick review, once you've signed in, you should be kind of on the home page. Go up to the right, go to apps, and then under apps, you want to click new app. And then fill out this form. Doesn't really matter what you call it. Maybe like careers in code cohort 5. I think description's optional. You have to put a name for it though. You can call it whatever. The most important part though is you need to, under this list, look for Books API and click Enable. So this is like the scopes under GitHub. You've got to sort of say like, what can this token access? And in our case, we're going to be using the Books API. So we need to be able to give this token access to the books data. And once we've done that, we can click Save in the lower right. And then this value here, this key, this is going to be your API token. So luckily, Twilio, or Twilio. Wow. The New York Times developer portal will keep this here. So if you refresh your page, it'll stick around. So if you like in the future log in and you go to apps, then now your app's going to be in this list and you can click on it and just get the key later. So it's a little bit, I guess, less secure than GitHub technically, but just sort of, it's how this one particularly works. So you're going to need this key. It's going to be an important value for making your request in the New York Times project. So, like again, I've given you the endpoint. I've done part of the hard work for you. I've told you what you've got to make a request to. So you don't need to select anything over here on the left. Like this is what you're going to be making a request to. Your challenge, though, is going to be to take this document, and I would say figure out how to make this request in Postman. That's step one. And like, I'm not going to tell you. You got to figure it out. There's going to be some slamming of your head against the keyboard. And I think Mel can probably attest this back to when he was doing this project, that it's a bit of a challenge. One clue I will give you. There's a little API tester thing over here. This is kind of like the curl thing we saw in GitHub. You can use this to try out the API. And as a hint, if you try out the API, this web app has got to make a request to the New York Times server. We talked about a way where you can spy on the requests that a web page is making in the developer console, developer tools. So that's maybe an interesting thread to pull, an interesting thing to think about. How could you get this page to make a request? And you might be able to just steal it from in there. But it's going to be up to you to figure that out. So that's where I'm going to leave you. That's it. It's been fun teaching you all for the past 2 weeks. And I'm going to have office hours this weekend. I think we said Sunday at 5, but I'll post it in the channel. And yeah, if you want to chat about more stuff, set up a one-on-one with me. My schedule is pretty available. And lastly, I'm going to try my best to be at OpenHack in July. I should be back up in Syracuse that week, so I'm going to try to be there. So love to see you all in person. But if not, I'm at OpenHack periodically. I'm at tech events in Syracuse periodically when I'm in town. But yeah, that's it. Thanks, folks. I appreciate all the compliments. So I believe next week you've got the week off for break, and then the week after that you're sort of back to your regularly scheduled programming with Max. So cool. Okay, folks. Well, see you this weekend for the office hours, hopefully.
So office hours will be Sunday at 5?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
that's the plan. I'm going to post it in Slack, though, just to confirm. But
Okay.
cool. See you all then, hopefully, or if not, at OpenHack, or if not that, at graduation.
Thank you.
Bye.